morning, mathematicians. This is lesson 25, our last lesson cool down from our unit 5, where we're thinking about dividing decimals by decimals, right? So our job for number 1 and 2 is to find the value of the expression, which just means get to the answer. And then, of course, we are going to explain or show our reasoning. Well, notice for number 1, I've simply written out our division expression. We see 1 6/10 being divided by 1/100th. Well, one thing we've noticed to be true is that we can treat the dividend and the divisor fairly and move the decimal to the right the same number of times in order to make our division problem even more simple. So I'm going to move my decimal 2 times over in my divisor. So I'm going to do the same thing in my dividend, 2 times. There's not a digit here, so I'm going to plug in a 0. So now I'm really thinking about 160 being divided by 1. Well, I know 160 being divided into one group is going to equal 160. So I have my answer to this problem. I'm going to write my final answer here. Actually, I'm going to type out my final answer here because we also need to explain it, don't we? Okay, I'm going to type out my final answer today in red, and that's going to allow us to see a little bit of difference between what I did to brainstorm this and how I'm going to type in my final answer. So my final answer here is 160. Now, how are we going to explain this? I'm not going to say, well, I moved my decimal 2 times in the dividend and 2 times in the divisor. No, that is a procedure that helps us do this quickly. But we can explain the mathematical reasoning behind it, right? Well, first of all, I could write out that there are 100 hundredths. There's a hundredth, right? In 1. We know that to be true. We also know that there are 60 hundredths in 6/10 and 1/100th. Actually, and let's write it all together. And therefore, 160 hundredths in 1 6/10. Okay, so notice here, boys and girls, I didn't actually write out move your decimal 2 times in the divisor and 2 times in the dividend. That's a procedure that helps us do it efficiently, but in all of our lessons in Unit 5, we can explain it with mathematical reasoning instead, right? Okay, let's go ahead down and let's do some similar first brainstorming in our division expression. For number 2, I'm seeing 2 87 hundredths being divided by 1/100th. Now, I'm going to follow some similar reasoning. I'm going to move my decimal 2 times in the divisor, and I'm going to mirror that by moving it 2 times in my dividend, which allows me to think about this differently as 287 being divided by 1. Well, if I take 287 and I put it all in one group, I'm going to have 287 in that group. So that is my answer. That is how we can use a procedure to answer our math problems very efficiently and accurately, but it's not the mathematical reasoning behind our answer. So now underneath, I'm going to go in and I'm going to write out the mathematical reasoning behind what we just did. So I'm going to say that my answer here is 287. That is the actual mathematical answer. Now let's write why. There are 200 hundredths in 2, right? That was the first step. Now we're going to say that there are 80 in, well, let's say 80 hundredths to be clear. There are 80 hundredths in 8/10. There are 7. I'm gonna write that in words and then keep my hundredth being the one I'm putting in standard form. Okay, there are 7 hundredths in my 7 hundredths. Therefore, there are 287 hundredths in 2 and 87 hundredths. Okay? All right, boys and girls, we have thought about our answers, both with our procedure as well as our great mathematical thinking, and that does finish off our Lesson 25 cool down.